Gentlemen, welcome back to the room formerly known as the Wife's Sewing. Overnight, come to me by way of the internets. I don't watch the news anymore. It just makes me angry. And yet again, here we go. Something to make you angry. Completely absurd. A crane collapsed in the east of London. Might I say prolapse. This is going to make you angry, unfortunately. I want to extend my condolences to the family of 85-year-old June Harvey, who had likely just put the kettle on and was about to enjoy some time with her family when, out of the blue, a crane clobbered her on the head. As absurd as that sounds, it's right out of a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy book. Terrible. And it's going to make you angry why it happened. I want to reiterate here. It just takes one fucking guy to stand up and say, hold on, take a little pause. Something ain't right here. Something ain't right. Let's fix it. We have a construction site where they're erecting a crane, a Wolf 3 Pfund Bay, made in Germany, painted blood red. This is a luffing crane. That means the jib, the long arm dangly bit with the hook on it, that goes up and down. What that allows you to do is reduce your turning radius, your swing radius, so that you can get into tight spots. Bird's eye view here of the aftermath. You can see that the base of the crane is not in any way bent. It's bent right at the middle and then carries on until it sunk its claw into that flat. You can see in the middle that bend. What that means is it was intact as it toppled over, and it bent over the top of the building. You can see it went ass over tea kettle. It went backwards. That luffing jib actually come up and toppled itself over backwards. You can see the cab is skyward, so it didn't fall forwards where this cab would be down. And because the basal section of the crane is so fresh and minty, it's wholly intact. We know that it likely fell over intact from the base. So we got to look at the base for clues. And here we have some. We have some pads, these white pads, which are on the end of outriggers, tiny little bolt holes. And it doesn't appear to be any damage from shearing some bolts off. That tells us that those bolts were likely not in place. Now, that's not a big deal because if you look at the bolt holes, they're but maybe 14 millimeter bolt holes. They're not for actually affixing the crane to anything. They're likely there as part of the manufacturing process, just primed on the bottom. And all of the outriggers, no paint chipped off, no stress markings around the pin bores, nothing like that. So we can tell that this didn't rip off of its moorings. This is the anchor point for a tower crane that has an in situ cast base. So you can see very, very skookum, deep. You can see here tie rods holding everything together. That was not the arrangement on this particular crane. We can tell because it just fell over. It's not all mangled at the base. You have a look at this tower crane with the iron workers. There's some structure behind it. Just to put a different angle on that dangle from another grainy view, we see the base of the crane wholly intact. We have the ballast at the base of the crane, which has not been tie rodded in. There's no tie rod holes, in fact. So I'm not sure how that would be affixed, but you can see there is a bias there at the base of the crane. There's some I-beams going right and left and none coming fore and aft. So that's where those I-beams are. That's where this ballast would be. Now the counterweight to the crane actually counteracts the load and the jib. It's up top. This is strictly ballast just for keeping it anchored to the ground. And clearly it didn't do its job very well. But there's a reason for that. And it's not a failure of the ballast. From the Wolfkran website, you can see at the base here, this one part of the crane, that's all the ballast. That's just weight for keeping it down. And this next slide here is the counterweight at the top of the crane. And you see 8 tons at the tippy top and 6 times 8 tons. You give you about 46 tons up in the air, 20 meters on this crane. Now, these cranes are not supposed to be a wet noodle. The fact that it is a wet noodle means something horrifically wrong. And generally, these are well engineered and well understood structures. It's generally a pretty big fuck up to get these things. Don't just fall out of the sky. Moving back to the general arrangement here of the construction site, we can see a melanoma of soil around the crane. That means that they needed to add some amendments in there because the soil, of course, was not strong enough, was not capable of handling the erection's load. And if you have a peak C carry out some lines from the existing pads, we see at the intersection, we should have another pad, and we don't see another pad. Of note is the close proximity of the site office to the base of the crane. They've had to amend this soil with some Navi-Jack or some sort of aggregate. Grady Hillhouse he's a civil engineer, makes videos on the YouTube. You can't quite get your engineering degree from him, but you get the gist of her. And it's a fantastic one he does on soil compaction. The reason roads are so expensive to build because you got to compact the soil, and you can only do it in lifts of about 8 to 12 inches. Also, the perimeter, that rough perimeter and the standing water, not particularly inspirance confident. Now we come to it splayed out before us, the sad fallen erection. Left uppermost pad has completely failed. Now, that has likely failed because the soil underneath of it has failed. You can see a nice square crane pad shaped hole right in the middle of her. And it's broken half in two. Of course, splayed to either side are the ballasts. Something as asinine, ridiculous, and well understood as soil mechanics. We had the soil not able to support the load of the crane to the detriment of the family of Mrs. Harvey. The mind boggles that in this day and age, we can't fucking get it right to compact soil and use the proper aggregates. It's just, the mind boggles. How can this be? It's fucking dirt. Time and time again with these catastrophic failures, what nobody saw coming. Believe me, nothing falls out of the sky like a meteorite, except maybe a meteorite. Even then, you always see it coming. We can see the back pads on the outriggers. The back pads have sloughed into that failed material, and the front pads towards us, the near pads, are still proud sitting on top of the material. Now, looking from this angulation, it looks to be about 12 inches. Now that sloughed maybe 8 to 12 inches has settled. And the thing is about settling, when you're talking about a crane or any kind of big structure, it's not settling. It's the material has failed because it hasn't been compacted properly, or it's sopping, wringing wet. So look to the management. They need to set the conditions for success. Alternatively, they also set the conditions for failure. The night shift foreman, the day shift foreman, he ain't reinventing the wheel, partner. He's just keeping the wheel rolling in the direction that management intends it to go. Now, the problem, of course, is there's so many errors and transgressions that need to occur for this crane to fall over. They could have done a deeper subbase. They could have compacted it more. They could have got rid of some of the surface water. They could, the fella in the cook shack over here having lunch. Hey, you mind tamping down slow your roll on the old tamper there. We're trying to have a fag over here type deal. I say this to you in all earnestness. Motherfuckers, or more apt, mother killers.
Brutal. Brutal. Just one guy could have prevented this. It's a sad state of affairs. When you take personal accountability out of the equation, the nanny state turns you into a cog in the wheel that's easily replaceable. Do as you're told and don't speak up. It just needed one guy to speak up. I mean, look at the state of the construction site. There's a little patch of Navijack in there surrounded by, well, the guys standing, you've seen it before. Guys standing around in mucker boots saying, geez, that's sloughing away there pretty good. I guess it'll settle out. Just keep loading on concrete there, and it'll settle out eventually. If it's settling, none of this stuff happens. It doesn't have a brittle failure and just crack like a piece of glass. There are precursors. And if you are attuned to what is going on, you will see those precursors and raise a red flag. These guys, they didn't do it. And June Harvey's family is in mourning because of it.